We experience the world before we make meaning of it. But we are meaning-making creatures, so we're constantly interpreting, trying to make sense of our worlds, and we're building our stories of what's going on. And these stories live with us to some extent consciously. They're articulate in our minds. We have words to tell them. And to some extent, they're unconscious. So the next thing I want to point to is the story-making process that we're all involved in. We are all building narratives of our lives. We're starting to build, or we're always building, an articulated understanding of what we think is important in life, what life is all about, and what's actually going on in a situation. We use words, phrases, sentences to construct these stories. And you can think about an interaction as sets of stories that are coming together and trying to find their way through. Now, it's really important to understand a bunch of things about stories. Again, we're trying to make the invisible visible in what's going on at this stage of thinking about ethical literacy. And one of the things I want to name is that our stories can have power. So let me tell you another little silly anecdote. It's an allegory more than anything else. Imagine that on the forest floor there is this koala. The koala goes up to this tree and he starts to climb this tree. And then strangely, he goes to the outermost limb of this tree, he opens his arms wide and he dives and psh, splat, he falls to the forest floor. It's terrible, heartbreaking kind of sound. But the koala just pops back up again. He goes back to the tree and he climbs diligently up again, goes to the limb again and dives. Same result. Splat, heartbreak, but he keeps doing this. And imagine that there's these two parrots that are watching this. And one parrot says to the other, "You know, honey, we really should tell him he's adopted." So the point of the story is that the stories we make in our lives, the narrative we have of our understanding of who we are, has the power to dictate for us our actions. Our stories are very powerful in that way. They tell us what we should be trying to do based on what we understand life to be all about. The story is also meant to show that other people have power over us and our stories. People telling us what our stories should be help inform who we are, how we ought to live, and then we act accordingly. And if we don't own those stories, we can run into trouble. Our stories are also crucial for navigating the difficulties in life. It's often said by many wise people that if we don't understand why we're doing something that's painful, it can be very difficult to navigate that struggle, that suffering. But if we understand why we're doing what we're doing, then all of a sudden, suffering is bearable. It's manageable. It's very difficult to raise kids. They get into trouble all the time. They go on first dates. They drive for the first time. They make all kinds of choices that make our heart stop. I haven't experienced it, but giving birth is a crazy experience. Why do we go through the pain of parenthood? It's because there's deep meaning that makes that suffering worthwhile. If we didn't have that meaning, we wouldn't actually have the reason to put up with that suffering. What's interesting about stories is that our stories are always in relationship. They're in relationship with ourselves, they're in relationship with other people, they're in relationship with the environment, the built environment, the natural environment, and they're in relationship, many believe, with some kind of divine, something that's beyond reality. So our stories always involve relationships of different kinds. Our stories are also always somewhat fictitious. Life is not always rational. Things don't always happen in orderly, neat kinds of ways. Events are chaotic. And what we do is we look back on the chaos of our lives is we impose an order on that. So story making is actually a creative activity of trying to put together, make meaning of a series of events that may actually be disconnected and disparate in some ways. And if you take all of what I've said, then another crucial thing about stories is that they're always fallible. The story I'm making up of the world right now is the best I've got at the moment, but it's based on an incomplete perspective. It's a function of all of the different biases I bring to it. It's limited in perspective. It's making sense of things that don't necessarily fit neatly together. And it's the best I've got at the moment, but it's always going to be fallible. Whether I'm trying to decide what kind of car I buy or how to navigate transportation or how I work with this patient and doctor, my perspective, the story I bring to this, is still in development, still under construction, and still not going to be ideal. Now, the last thing I want to say about stories is that my story at any given moment is an expression of my identity. It's going to say, this is my understanding of what matters in life, my understanding of what's going on in the world. This is what I stand for. This is who I am. So our stories are really, really important because they are the summary, the picture that illustrates for the world who we are. We want to have as good, as rich, as clear an understanding of ourselves as possible to bring to the different challenging situations that we experience every day. So our stories reflect our identity, our system of values and beliefs that we bring to the situations that we experience. I want to concretize this a little bit by saying that our stories show up in our minds and in our hearts as we engage the difficult questions that we face every day. When I say our minds, what I mean is the articulated understandings of what should matter, of what the facts are, of what life is about that we bring. Our minds also reflect some of our skills, the skills to figure out what should be most important in a situation, the skills of evaluating evidence to figure out what the facts are, the skills of problem solving. That's all mind stuff. Our hearts are where our character lives, our internalized understanding of what the deeper purpose of life is, our internalized understanding of how I'm connected to other people, these kinds of things. And we'll unpack what we mean by mind and heart later on in the series or in other places. It's important to remember that our minds and hearts, kind of consistent with what we've been saying so far, are situated. So what I'm bringing in my value system, in my identity, in my mind and in my heart has been shaped. It's been shaped by, well, a whole bunch of things, like my biology, the way that my brain works. It's been shaped by how I grew up, my family, my parents, and what I was taught there. It's been shaped by the history of experiences that I've had, my family has had, and the tradition of my family has. Because all of those things have influenced what has come out as important in our lives and what I have been interpreting as I have made my own identity, as I've articulated my value system. And it's been shaped more specifically by the different political, social, economic conditions in which my tradition has happened, if you will. And so all of these things are influencing the way that my mind and my heart are. So take a moment and think about, what are the traditions that you've been influenced by? Where do your grandparents come from? Where do their parents come from? How do your ancestors influence who you are today? Who are you? What's your story? That's part of what we need to understand as we make sense of ethically salient situations.